I had been hired to help organize and document the belongings in an old house that my client, Daniel, had recently purchased. The house was large, quiet, and much older than I expected. Daniel told me he was planning to renovate it and needed everything cataloged before the work began. But before I started, he gave me a few rules. The basement was off limits. The locked room at the end of the hallway was off limits. And if I received any packages while working there, I wasn't supposed to open them. Then he added one more thing. If you hear footsteps upstairs while you're working alone, don't go looking for me. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. For the first few days, nothing unusual happened. I worked during the afternoon, photographed furniture, sorted boxes, and made notes about what could be kept or thrown away. Daniel usually stayed nearby, but one afternoon he told me he had to leave for a few hours. Before he left, he reminded me about the hallway. Don't go in there. I nodded. Then he left. About an hour later, I was in the kitchen when I heard something upstairs. A slow creak, then another. I stopped what I was doing. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps. They weren't loud, just slow footsteps moving across the floor above me. I waited. Everything went quiet. Then I heard them again. This time, they stopped directly above the kitchen. I told myself the house was old. Maybe it was the pipes. Maybe the floor was settling. But then I heard a door close. I went upstairs. The hallway was empty. I was about to turn around when I noticed something. The door at the end of the hallway wasn't completely closed anymore. It was open by a few inches. I knew Daniel had locked it. I stood there for a moment, trying to decide whether I should leave it alone. Then I heard a faint sound from inside. A computer fan. I pushed the door open. The room was almost empty. There was a desk against the wall. An old computer sitting on it. Several shelves. That was it. Except for the photographs. There were dozens of them. People standing outside houses. People getting into cars. People walking down empty streets. Some had clearly been taken from far away. Others looked like they had been taken through windows. I picked up one of the photographs. There was a name written on the back. I picked up another. Different name. Then another. Every photograph belonged to someone different. I started wondering what kind of person Daniel really was. Then I noticed the computer. The screen was already on. Folders covered the desktop. Each one had a person's name. I opened one. Inside were photographs, addresses, notes, dates. Everything looked organized, methodical, like someone had been tracking that person for a long time. I opened another folder. Same thing. Then another. Whatever I was looking at, it wasn't normal. I was about to close the computer when I noticed a folder near the bottom. One word, Kara. I stared at it. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it had to be someone else. Then I opened it. The first photograph showed me walking into a grocery store. The second showed me getting into my car. The third was taken outside my apartment building. I couldn't look away. The photographs weren't old. Some had been taken only days earlier. Then I opened another image. It showed me standing outside my apartment late at night. The timestamp said it had been taken 2 days earlier. I remembered that night. I'd never gone outside. I'd spent the entire evening inside, which meant someone had been standing outside my apartment, watching me, without me ever knowing. A car door slammed outside. I looked toward the window. Daniel's car was pulling into the driveway. My mind immediately jumped to one thought. I needed to leave. I shut down the computer, put everything back exactly where I'd found it, closed the door, then hurried downstairs. A few seconds later, Daniel walked through the front door. He looked at me. You're leaving?
Yeah.
I'm done for today. For a moment,
He just looked at me.
then he smiled. Okay. Nothing about his voice sounded unusual.
Somehow.
That made it worse. I left without mentioning the room. The entire drive home, I kept checking my mirrors. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going back. Around noon, Daniel called.
His voice was calm.
Almost friendly. Everything okay? I told him I wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be able to continue the job. There was a long pause. Then he quietly said, You should have told me before you went into that room." I didn't answer. He continued, "I was hoping you wouldn't." The call ended. I sat there staring at my phone for several seconds. Then I called the police. 2 detectives met me outside the house later that afternoon. This time, Daniel's car wasn't there. The front door was unlocked. The detectives searched every room while I waited in the hallway. One of them eventually called me upstairs. The room was empty. The desk was gone. The computer was gone. The shelves were gone. Even the marks on the carpet where the furniture had been were gone. It looked as though nobody had used that room in years. The detectives searched the basement, the attic, every room in the house. Nothing. No photographs. No files. No records. No Daniel. One detective asked if I was absolutely certain I'd seen everything. I told him exactly what I'd found. He believed that I believed it, but there wasn't a single piece of evidence left. A few days later, I learned something even stranger. The name Daniel had given me wasn't real. The phone number he'd used had been disconnected, and the paperwork for the house had been completed through a company that no longer existed. It was as if he'd planned to disappear from the very beginning. Weeks passed. Eventually, life started feeling normal again. Then one evening, I found an envelope underneath my apartment door. No stamp, no address, just a plain white envelope. Inside was a single photograph. I recognized the house immediately. It was Daniel's house, but the woman standing in front of it wasn't me. It was my mother. The photograph looked decades old. I turned it over. Written across the back, in black ink, were 6 words. "Now you know why I hired you." I stared at them for a long time, because there was something I'd never told anyone. My mother had disappeared when I was a child. Everyone always told me she'd left. No one ever knew where she went. I looked at the photograph again. That's when I noticed someone standing in the upstairs window, watching her. I leaned closer. My heart sank. It was Daniel. I don't know how that was possible. The photograph looked far older than he should have been, but I knew what I'd seen. And that's when I realized something even worse than the fact that he'd been watching me. He hadn't hired me because he needed help organizing an old house. He had hired me because, somehow, he had been watching my family long before he ever started watching me.